In our last civil dialogue, WisconsinEye asked the two longest-serving members of the Senate and the Assembly to talk about the changes they've seen. Well, it's only fitting then that WisconsinEye would ask in this civil dialogue two of our newest incoming lawmakers and two of our youngest to talk about what they're looking forward to and why they ran. So I want to thank Republican Rep Elect Romaine Quinn of Rice Lake, who will represent the 75th District. Romaine, welcome.
Thank you.
You're 24?
I am 24, yep.
Thank you. And Democratic Rep Elect Mark Spreitzer of Beloit, who will be representing the 45th District, turning 28 next week.
28 next week.
Well, thanks so much. I'm just interested in your impressions, and
Yeah.
welcome to a very amazing institution and quite a session. Let's start out with the basics. Why are you a Democrat and a Republican, Mark?
I'm a Democrat because I believe that government should be working for ordinary people, and that means making sure that our society has opportunities for people who want to work hard and get ahead, provide for their families, and have a good life, and also take care of those who may have reasons and challenges that they face where they're not fully able to take care of themselves. I want to make sure that we're supporting basic priorities like public schools, healthcare, higher education, protecting rights for people and protecting the clean environment that we live in, and also making sure that we're providing for those basic local services and local units of government that matter so much in our daily lives. And I think as a Democrat, my philosophy is that government should be addressing those basic issues and making sure that we all have a chance to get ahead.
Thank you very much. Why are you a Republican?
Right, and I agree with Mark in the sense that, government is there to provide a certain basic level playing field, and I think that's what the Republican Party is about, is not necessarily equal outcomes, but an equal starting field that we can all achieve from. And if you look at the core of the party, and I think it reflects the core of what the country was founded on, individual liberty and the freedom to live the life that you dreamed of, and how can we get everyone to a point where we can start at that same basic point, but achieve our goals based on how hard we work. And I see the Republican Party as being that best vehicle to really advocate those values.
Well, it's intriguing to me that you have both served in significant local office. Former mayor of Rice Lake, president of the Beloit Common Council. Let's start with you, Romaine.
Sure.
Lessons from your local service in terms of state government, the relationship between Rice Lake, city government, and the state, please.
Sure, and I've answered that question a few times, and a lot of government tends to be the same. It's just a matter of how many zeros you add on the end of their budget process. But the closer you get to local government, the more personal it gets, and that's what politics really is about, is the personal relationships you build either with other legislators or with your community and your constituents. And local government's fantastic. I absolutely loved it. And it was about building those relationships with your community and really caring about those people, even when you disagree on that issue or whatever it may be. And, it's how can we come together? We all want to get to a better place and improve the lives of the people that live in our community, but we just take different paths to get there. So it's just how do you reconcile that? Because I believe we do both sincerely want the best. It's just how do we get there? So my time serving as mayor of Rice Lake for 2 years and on the Common Council there, I think, it was a fascinating time. I absolutely enjoyed it, and I think it really helped prepare me for this job and being able to relate to others and really bring the people from my district, their voice down here to Madison.
Before I get to Mark, the annual budget of Rice Lake is about what?
Well, if you look at what we assess in the levy, it's just over $5 million. So
Okay.
a little bit different than the $70 billion we're about to vote on.
I understand.
Yeah.
And then the annual budget, City of Milwaukee, Mr. Council President, or City of Beloit, excuse me.
30 million general fund, 90 million total.
Okay. And lessons that you have taken from local government service to the next level in the Capitol?
Relationships are definitely important. I completely agree with Romaine on that, but I would say the fact that political disagreements at the local level don't need to be partisan. Beloit City Council is nonpartisan. Our other local governments generally are as well, and I can agree with a council member on one issue, disagree with them on another, but it's not based on party label. It's based on our ideas, and I think that that's something I hope to bring to the Capitol here, is that we don't need to immediately let party label dictate that we have to disagree on something. Another lesson is that a lot of the funding for local government comes through the state from shared revenue, and that needs to be something we pay attention to in the state budget, because that's where a significant amount of the state budget goes, is back whether it's to a city, a school district, or a county. A lot of basic service is provided at the local level, and we need to keep that in mind.
Well, we're going to alternate questions, so back to you, Mark. What are the basic obligations of state government, the basic duties, sir?
Well, obviously, one piece, as I just mentioned, is to make sure that local government has the funding that it needs. But in terms of direct state issues, I would say statewide transportation infrastructure, healthcare, looking after public education, our higher education system, UW, and our technical colleges, and then helping to create an opportunity for economic growth, for job creation, making sure that we've got an environment where businesses can grow and thrive, where people can be employed and have living wages, and making sure that we're protecting the environment we live in, and then promoting trade with other states or countries and tourism so that we can bring people from outside of Wisconsin in to see what we've got going on here, and also export our products and our services to other people who want to buy them.
Romaine, that's the view from the city of Beloit. You come from a rural district, so same question.
Right, and again, no matter what part of the state you're in, you're going to face a lot of the same issues. It's just certain ones are going to have more of an emphasis or greater importance than others. But again, I take a very limited view of whether it be the federal government or state government. But again, it still is there to provide the basic essentials. We all want good roads. We all want good public schools. Fortunately, in my district, I have those things. And it's finding that balance between state support and local support. And coming from local government, I would like to see the state stepping back from some of these duties and allowing our counties and our municipalities to take control of those. I don't want Rice Lake to have to wait for state dollars to come in to fix the roads. How can we get to a point where Rice Lake is taking care of Rice Lake and my counties are taking care of their own people, and we're not waiting on Madison, and Madison isn't waiting on Washington, D.C. And I think that's where your efficiencies are going to come from. Your solutions that are going to lead us into the next, out of our next problems are already taking place and developing in the local areas, at least in my district they are. And so I would like to get a point where, yes, the state still plays a vital role in certain functions, but let's start empowering our local communities to really take control of their own destinies and develop the necessary things like some of the ones that Mark mentioned.
Now, you've just, is it fair to say you've just outlined a vision of less state government doing less, local government doing more?
Well, when you look at, philosophically, I think the federal government's, far larger than it should be in the state, needs to play a more important role. But then again, at the same level, I think the state could slowly back away from doing certain things and empower our local communities, yes, like our counties, to take more control over, whether, no matter what the issue may be. So I would like to see less state, more not only local control, but, local jurisdiction over a lot of these issues.
Mark, I'm not trying to pick a fight, but do you want to respond? Should state government be doing less, sir?
I think state government should continue to make sure that we're functioning highly as an entire state, and our communities are as interconnected as ever, and so that's very important. Now, I certainly am a supporter of local control, and I think there are a lot of issues that are best decided at the local level, and we need to make sure local governments have funding authority to take care of their needs. But there are also a lot of things that make sense to be coordinated statewide, and to make sure that we're collecting revenue on a statewide basis and distributing it to places that have high need and may not have the local tax base to support that need.
Okay. You are representatives, very active representatives of the 20-something generation. Now, the polls say most of your peers aren't interested, don't think a government at any level is relative. How can 20-somethings be more empowered and participate more in some of these, follow politics or the decisions made by state, local, federal governments? I think it's your turn, Mark.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily agree that 20-somethings aren't interested, but I think a lot of 20-somethings are discouraged by our current political process, by the divisiveness, the polarization that we've seen, and the fact that government just isn't tackling some of the issues that young people care about, whether that's student debt and making higher education more affordable, making sure there are living wage jobs and careers really in a variety of areas available for people to get into, and tackling some of the other challenges that we really face as a society that I think our government just hasn't been able to deal with. So I think if we can get government working on some of those issues, we're definitely going to attract more interest. I would also say, looking at what the Assembly is going to look like in January, I think there are going to be about 10 of us, or nearly that are in our 20s. And so clearly there's a group of us, and not just the two of us, that have gotten very involved in greater numbers than we've seen in a long time. And I hope that will also inspire more interest.
Romaine, you got very active in politics at a very young age.
Sure.
Did some of your peers say, "What are you doing that for? I mean, let's do some other things."
Of course. I mean, I have friends that if they ran for office, I wouldn't vote for them either. So, but yeah, and it's an important issue to cover, and it's a problem because a lot of the issues that millennials face don't get addressed because as a voting bloc, there's no reason to cater to us because we don't come out in numbers.
But you outnumber us boomers. But anyway, go ahead.
Correct. Yeah, but we're just not as politically active, right? And I think it's even a cultural thing, kind of a deep lack of appreciation for institutions and what we have today in general. And I think we've had it so good for so long. even when it was bad, we really never had to pay attention because we still had it good. Well, now I think you see a lot of millennials just trying to stay afloat, and so they're so busy working 2 jobs or trying to get through school that they don't have time to sit down and read all the papers and study up on a candidate or this and that. So I think it's important, especially for legislators that are our age, to really engage that group and say, hey, these issues we're talking about now really do matter, because it's how much you're paying next year at UW-Madison, it's how much you're going to have to pay back on your loans, what you're going to make in your workplace, if you can or cannot buy your first home, or different things like that. So we just need to bring it back to a personal level, and I think that works for all groups. How does it affect me? Unfortunately, we're in a society where if it doesn't really affect me, I don't really pay attention. So how can we bring it back to that group and say, these issues do matter to you, and you better start paying attention?
That budget that you'll be voting on within about 6 months, that affects everybody's life. Quick question, before we talk about specific issues. What's the first bill you plan to introduce? I think it's your turn, Romaine.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues I talked about on the campaign, from rural school funding reform, different ways. How can we continue to make Wisconsin competitive? That was our focus when I was mayor of Rice Lake, is if there's a business coming to Barron County or the general area, what can I do to make sure that it will come to Rice Lake and it will be in my industrial park, so it will employ the people in my district and improve our area as well. So it's the same kind of thing. What can we do? And a lot of that is reach out to our business communities, reach out to our local government leaders. What can we do different? How can we reform the way government inherently works to improve it better? In the city of Rice Lake, we literally restructured how departments existed just so we could take business by the hand and bring them in and make sure that they were comfortable and wanted to be in Rice Lake. So there's a lot of different areas, like I said, education. I would like to see, maybe even in terms of controlling state spending, getting us towards that path of pushing control back down, maybe some sort of a taxpayer bill of rights. And so we're not having a debate on what do we do with all this extra money. It should go back to the taxpayers anyway. We should be having a debate on where to spend it. If there's extra, it should go back. So I think there's a lot of different things we can address, and I'm excited to address, because we've got a great caucus and a great assembly that's going to be sworn in January, and they're really looking to get work done, not just to get reelected. So it's going to be an exciting time. Issue
you want to specialize in, or maybe first bill, Mark?
I think first bill would be related to jobs. That certainly was the #1 issue that I ran on and is very important to my district. And I think there are a couple of bills, I don't have one specific one, but there are several that have been come up in the last session that unfortunately haven't passed yet, related to supporting small businesses, angel investing, certainly raising the minimum wage to help support the middle class for people who are already working but aren't able to support a family on their income. So those would be a couple places I'd start. And then knowing that the budget is really going to be the first thing we tackle, as I mentioned before, shared revenue for local governments, making sure we can meet those local needs is also a priority for me.
Well, you mentioned the budget. Let's talk about some specific budget issues. First, funding transportation programs. The Department of Transportation Secretary, as you're aware, has just recommended $751 million in higher taxes and fees, and a $575 million diversion from the state general fund to support the next 2 years of transportation spending statewide. And I just came from a press conference in which local government leaders said, hey, we have a huge problem here. But I'm just curious, when I did my campaign interviews, we didn't know what Secretary Gottlieb was going to be recommending. So is his package of higher taxes and fees and a $574 million diversion from the general fund something that you could support? I think it's your turn, Mark.
Sure. Well, first of all, as I mentioned in the campaign, and this is still true, I'm very committed to finding a good funding solution for transportation. It is a critical issue, and not just in my district, although certainly there, but around the state. In terms of the specific proposal, I'm still looking at it and weighing the information about it, and haven't made a decision. I think there are some things that have promise, and there may be some other things that need to be adjusted, but I'm still looking at the specifics before I make a decision.
And a follow-up, Mark. Some people say if DOT doesn't get funding at this level, they're going to delay projects like, widening the interstate from right through the 45th district.
That's why I'm committed to finding a solution. I think we absolutely need to get the funding.
How critical is widening the interstate for the 45th?
It's very important. It's a project we've worked on as a city council. It's critical to bringing traffic through both business and tourism, and it'll also have an effect locally in terms of the interchange that will really have a business effect there. So it's a very important project for the district.
And in the 75th, you need good roads for your farmers and trucking and tourism.
Right.
Well, how do you feel about the Secretary's package? Are Are you being asked by some of your constituents, can you vote for that?
Sure, and I haven't been addressed, well, we're not in office yet, so I've gotten a few calls here and there, but I think it's still new to a lot of people as well. I just don't see how a tax increase of $750 million is just going to go through. I just don't think that's going to happen as is. Now, there's certain bits and pieces in there that, look somewhat favorable. I mean, if you drive a hybrid vehicle, you pay far less share of the road, even though you wear it out just as much. So I think there could be some fair compromises. I'm not going to glue myself to anything right now. I just know that I certainly would not be in favor of that big of an increase, because again, why do we cut taxes if we're just going to take it somewhere else? So I would like to see if there's any way that if we think roads, we need more emphasis in roads, or we need more emphasis in schools, or health and human services, let's find areas where we can take away and reprioritize. I think, the state budget at being just over $70 billion, there's got to be room where we can do some shifting and some play in that sense.
The last budget only passed with votes by members of your party. The three
Yep.
tax cuts passed only with votes of members of your party. Do you hope a transportation compromise attracts votes from people like your good friend right next door to you?
Yep, and I think it will. I think there are common sense ways we can come together on some of those things, but again, everyone has their own ideas right now. I don't know what's going to come out of his leadership, my leadership. Again, it's so new yet. So, like I said, I think there will be a lot of compromise. Again, you talked about that there's so much, very little bipartisanship. And you look at the last assembly session, 94% of the bills were passed, but with bipartisan votes. So, I think there is a lot of compromising. And I just heard comments from your assembly leader and the Senate minority leader, and they're excited to work with us too. So, there's a lot of coming together that does take place, and I think it will happen over this issue as well.
Next issue, health care. The Department of Health Services wants an additional $760 million to care for people that are on Medicaid. 1 in 5 Wisconsin residents are on Medicaid. Something that this is a result of the governor's strategy to not take the federal money to expand Medicaid. You ready to vote for an additional $760 million for health care? I think it's your turn.
Well, I don't think the need for that 700 and some million was a result of not taking that expansion. I don't think that all directly came from that. And I was a supporter of the governor's move by not doing that, because it's time that states start paying for the programs they want and stop relying on the federal government, especially since the federal government, now our national debt is $18 trillion, and they don't have this money to give to us in the first place. So I think that what we did was responsible. We are literally covering everybody, whether they're on the exchanges or they're being covered through state programs. I would have to look and see what the increases are going for before I'd say, yes, you need this much money. And again, I don't know where that's going to come from. Are you going to raise the income tax? Are people okay paying more property taxes to pay for this? You look at the state of Wisconsin, we've always been generous in our welfare benefits, and there was a report out by the Federal Reserve out of Chicago that said Wisconsin still spends almost 16% more on average on general welfare per capita than other states across the country. So there's got to be ways where we can work to reform certain things and, again, prioritize if that's a need. But it's so easy to say we need more money for schools, or we need an increase to lower tuition, or we need better roads, but where's this money going to come from? So I think, again, we'll just need to sit down in those committee hearings and really come to the table and try to find some of those solutions.
Healthcare funding, Mark?
Well, this is one where we disagree. I think it was absolutely the wrong decision to turn away that federal money. And let's remember that that's money that Wisconsin residents paid in taxes that is now potentially going to other states or other programs because we're not choosing to accept those dollars. So we're leaving people not as covered as they could for health insurance, or not as affordably covered by not taking that money. And it's money that, again, we paid, and we should be getting back to make sure that we're covering it. So I think that's the answer, is we should have taken that money, and we still should.
Okay. Let's talk about school aids. Superintendent of Public Instructions Tony Evers has asked for $613 million more for school aids. He wants to change the formula to establish a poverty factor. He wants to help rural schools, like the 75th. And he wants to rework the school aid formulas, but he says the cost of that is an additional, an upper $613 million. Sir.
I like the proposal. I think fair funding for our schools is a great plan, and it's something I'm interested in working on. It would certainly benefit the school district in Beloit, where we do have a high poverty district. It would also benefit rural schools in my district. And I think when we look around the state at rural school districts being represented by both Democrats and Republicans, this could be an opportunity for bipartisanship. In terms of where we find the money, obviously we need to weigh priorities, and there are a lot of things that we've been talking about that we're going to need to balance to see if that's doable. But it's certainly, I think educating kids today is what's going to prepare us for a vibrant economy and a healthy society tomorrow, and needs to be a top priority. So I'm very supportive of the concept and hope we can figure out a way to find the money.
How wide is the achievement gap in your hometown school districts?
In Beloit, it's definitely an issue. It's an issue that our local school district has been talking about and making progress on, but we certainly still have a ways to go, and I think it's an issue that we need to continue paying a lot of attention to.
Okay. Romaine, $613 million more for schools, even though part of it,
Right.
a slice of it, would go for rural schools.
Right, and see, again, I just don't see how that's feasible. And it's so easy. I wish we get to a point where if an agency came forward and said, I need this much more money, I would like to see suggestions by the agency to see what tax they would raise and they would be okay with to fund some of these things. But you're right, rural school funding, it was a big issue during my campaign because it's critical, because I have school districts, small school districts in my 75th Assembly District that are funding their entire operations 90% on local property taxes. That's just not feasible. These small communities can't afford it, and due to the nature of northern Wisconsin, we have a lot of land, not a lot of people, so when you have school districts that are so many square miles, it looks like we're wealthy because of the property values we have, but really we make economically less than southern parts of the state. So there's got to be a way, and I don't know what the answer is, if it's each student gets a certain amount no matter where they are in the state, and that's what the school gets, or what that may be, but I don't necessarily think we need to just throw more money into it, because even when we increased school funding the last time, some of my districts actually got less money just because of the nature of how the system operates. So before I would commit to any kind of significant increase, which that is very significant, I would like to look more into that. And again, where's that money going to come from? So I would be interested in more changing the funding formula now without throwing more money into it, seeing how that works first, how it would benefit. But again, how can I get Mark to vote for a change in funding formula where all of a sudden Beloit gets less money because they're economically better off, and send it to Rice Lake? So it's going to be a tough issue, but it needs to be addressed, because I do have schools in my district that are having referendums just to keep the doors open.
How many hours a day are some students in the 75th district spending on buses?
And that's an issue too, and it just comes with the district and where we live, but we love where we live, so that's a sacrifice we make. And some schools are slowly consolidating, which I think is a necessary evil at some point. But I remember I rode the bus, depending on, we could be on there an hour.
Just one way?
It's just the nature of the beast.
Just one way?
Yep,
Okay.
depending on where you're at. I mean, if you open roll, it's your choice to get on a bus and go 20 miles or whatever it may be. So it just depends. But again, I can't complain because we have great schools. Our report cards that come out of our schools in the 75th district are phenomenal. So for the money we have, what they do is excellent.
Okay. Let's ask about another K-12 issue, Parents' Choice, the voucher program.
Sure.
The speaker has said he wants to remove the 1,000 student cap on outstate participants in choice and vouchers, separate from the two major cities, City of Milwaukee and he wants to keep it going in those two cities, in Racine and Milwaukee.
Sure.
So the issue is, vote to remove the 1,000 limit outstate on the cap. I think it's yours.
Sure. And I'm obviously a supporter of the program. I am a product of K-8 Catholic education, but I went to our public high school, and I've been at UW-Barron County, which is a 2-year university, and I've been on campus at a 4-year university, so I've kind of seen all aspects of the educational spectrum. Now, again, studies show children all learn different. And we have a charter school that my local high school has now started with a grant. And honestly, that wouldn't have worked for me, just the environment, the way they set up the learning process. But we're at a point now where every kid, one size just doesn't fit all. And so if it means, you're in a Montessori school or a charter school or a private Catholic or religious school, whatever that may be, I want to fund the student to make sure that they get the best education possible, regardless of what setting that may be in. And I think that's what we need to focus on.
You just said it's your intent to vote to remove the 1,000 cap outstate, correct?
Well, I think we can take a look at it for sure. And that's what's hard too is, how is it okay just for the Milwaukee and Racine kids to receive that program and not others? So again, there's a fiscal impact. There always is, no matter what we talk about. So
Yes.
I'd like to look at that first. But again, in my district, there are certain stipulations where school districts can't lose a certain percentage of their students. We only have one Catholic school in my entire county, so it's not like all of a sudden these kids are going to be flocking to these other schools and we're leaving our public schools behind. So I think we can look at the numbers, see what works, get past like the emotional arguments of it, and really come to some solutions and agree and understand that all kids learn different. So we need to get them in an environment where they can achieve their greatest ability to learn and their potential.
expand choice? Mark?
I wouldn't have done the statewide expansion in the first place, and I wouldn't vote to raise the cap. I think that's, we're talking about statewide education dollars here, and I think it's important we talk about that fiscal impact. We're just talking about how do we get more money into our schools, how do we help our rural school districts, and even if there's not a voucher school in a particular school district, by sending those state dollars to that school in another part of the state, we're still taking from the overall pot of money that we have available for public education unless we're willing to raise taxes or find additional dollars somewhere else. So I think my focus is on the public schools. That's certainly a different question from charter schools that are chartered by a school district that have creative flexibility. We have a couple of those in Beloit. But in terms of private voucher schools, that's taking money out of the public school system when I think we need to be supporting the public school system.
Do you want to then, it's obvious you don't want to take the 1,000 student cap off.
Right.
Do you want to shut it down outstate and just keep it running in these 2 urban cities in southeast Wisconsin?
Yes. Obviously, we'd need to phase that out for the students that are currently in the schools, but I would do that.
Okay. Governor Walker, and there's a lot of support in the Capitol for freezing tuition, both in the UW system and the tech colleges for the next 2 years. The regents want $95 million more to live with that freeze. Just your thoughts. If growing the economy and jobs, which is more relevant, the UW system or tech colleges? So I've now asked 2 questions. Mark, go ahead.
Well, I think that's a false dichotomy. They're both very relevant. They both serve different populations, and we absolutely need to make sure that they both stay strong. And that means that they're going to need funding from one source or another. And I work in higher education as a fundraiser at Beloit College right now, so I'm familiar with higher education funding and also the need to keep education affordable. So the tuition freeze certainly from keeping education affordable for our students, that's a positive thing, but I don't want to do it at the expense of quality schools for those students to go to. Certainly in terms of the funding, we'll need to talk about that in the context of the budget and see where those dollars could come from, but if we can do that and keep education more affordable without reducing quality, then I'm all for it.
Freeze tuition, both the UW system and tech colleges, which are so important to your communities?
Right, and we're fortunate, again, I have a 2-year UW institution right in Rice Lake, as well as a WITC institution. So we're very fortunate in that sense. You know, it's hard. You got to find that balance because they both have their benefits. And right now, we're still kind of in an economy where a lot of your jobs are coming out of the technical field, not so much careers out of 4 years. So, but again, they both play an integral part, not only in our communities, but the state overall. So I would continue to support the governor's tuition freeze.
We've been talking about the major programs, and it's no news to you, gentlemen, there's not enough money to fund all these. And Governor Walker and your party, Romaine, have said we'd still like to have a tax cut. So what are your thoughts on how you take all these demands for vital public services and a tax cut? So the issue is another tax cut? Whose turn? Your turn.
I think it's my turn, right? And again, I've always said, no matter whether you're looking at the federal level or the state level, I mean, it's just as irresponsible to tax and spend continually too much as it is to cut taxes and then not cut services at the same time. I mean, it has to go hand in hand. You know, if we want these programs and you want to spend more money, then let's sit down, put it on the table and be honest about it. But you know, offering more services and saying we need more money for this and not having a solution to pay for it is just as wrong. So I think we're going to need to sift through the issues that we face right now before we can start even talking about other tax cuts. But again, Wisconsin is still one of the highest tax states in the country. So how are other states doing it cheaper than us? How can we compare? So I think there should be a lot of study because we've got neighbors close with it that do things different with funding of their roads, funding of their schools. So I think there's a lot of research that we can be done to see how can we, again, continue to lead the country in terms of a lot of these issues by incorporating what works for other states as well.
Quick follow-up. If your caucus decides, yes, we're going to fund all these critical programs and we're still going to cut taxes, and you're asked, which tax should we cut, what's your answer?
Well, I know the biggest gripe I hear for the most part is local property taxes. And, you know, I saw it firsthand when I go door-to-door campaigning and I meet a 90-year-old woman who has to take out a loan just to stay in the house she's been in for 50 years. It kills me because she knows she can't give it to her kids. She doesn't even pay back on the loan because she just does that just to pay the property taxes. So we got to get to a point where they're controlled. We're forcing people off of lakes up in northern Wisconsin. They've had these cottages and their families for generations and they can't stay in them. They can't afford to. So I think that's the biggest impact, but again, how do you cut that? So I want us to get to a point where we are going more towards user fees. You know, I don't like paying the gas tax, but I think it's the best alternative because I'm paying for my use of the road. So how can we get to a point where I'm not just inherently taxing you because of just how much you make or the piece of land you live on, but are you using that service? So you should pay for that service. So I think the Republicans are open to a lot of different ideas and solutions for that, and I think that's the road we need to be continuing
Mark, thanks
down.
for your patience. So the issue is, with all the demands for health care, transportation, and school aids, tax cut?
Well, I agree that we need to weigh all of those priorities before we jump into proposing a tax cut. But if we are looking at tax relief, it needs to be targeted to the middle class. And something like the Earned Income Tax Credit, restoring the cuts to that would be the type of thing I would be interested in that regard. But I think it's way too premature in terms of knowing what our fiscal picture truly looks like and having a chance to talk about all the issues that need funding that we've already discussed to start going down that road.
Okay, just a few more questions. Just this week, the president of WMC defended their proposal for a right-to-work law in Wisconsin. Your reaction to that, Mark?
It would be very divisive, an attack on the middle class. We've seen in other states that have done these laws that wages are lower on average than they are here in Wisconsin, and that's certainly not a road I want to go down. It's really the right to work for less, and that's what we've seen in other places, making it harder for workers to collectively bargain for their wages and benefits and working conditions. And I think we saw the divisiveness that we had with Act 10, which was also an attack on the middle class, and I certainly don't want to go back and repeat that. I think it would jeopardize our ability to work on the other things where we maybe do have some common ground, and I hope that it doesn't come forward.
Romaine, right to work?
Right, and I mean, I could sit here and cherry pick stats too, but I mean, you can say wages are lower, but then I could turn around and say most of the states have higher growth coming out of the recession by far than states that don't have right to work. But again, it comes down to the philosophy of, I don't believe it's my job or Mark's job as a legislator to tell you who you have to associate with or not. So if a union is providing a benefit, that's great. I have nothing against whether public or private unions, but you should have the freedom to choose that, and I think that's the most basic freedom we have, is the freedom to associate or not associate. I don't want to pass a law that says you can't join a union, and I don't want to pass a law that says you have to, just inherently on what you want to do for a living. So I think it's a common sense reform where I don't think, as politicians, we should be using the force of government to say you have to be a part of a certain group.
We could spend a whole show on that issue.
Oh, I know. Yes, we could.
You've just come from 2 days worth of seminars on how to become a member of the Assembly. Most interesting thing you've learned, or the biggest surprise in those? You've been lectured by experts in public speaking, time management, your leaders. Biggest surprise?
I don't know if there's been a big surprise, but
okay.
I think...
Is it hard to adjust to everything being so different? Excuse me for interrupting you.
A lot of it is similar to what I was expecting, but it's great to get into the detail on the budget and some of those numbers, talk to the legislative service agencies and walk through the process of how a bill becomes a law and start to think about that. So that we did some of that today, and I think it was very helpful. But I really enjoyed a chance to get to know the new members on both sides of the aisle, and I think that was probably, aside from the information, the best opportunity. A part of that is really getting to meet each other and spend some informal time together.
So your takeaway from all this orientation?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's been a lot to absorb. Obviously, no matter what your background is, you're going to have a learning curve, or regardless of what your age may be, you're going to have a learning curve. But I think the biggest surprise is how much support we have as legislators. We've been sitting through a lot of these different councils and groups have been coming to us, and just they're just such great people. So, I mean, to have the Fiscal Bureau and the Legislative Council and Wisconsin's really lucky to have such an awesome staff that is really here to make us as legislators look good, because they're just great at what they do, and I'm looking forward to working with all the staff in the building.
Final question, gentlemen. Thanks for your time. It's this. I will be a successful first-term member of the Assembly if. Whose turn? I think it's yours.
My turn. If. I believe I will be successful, because, again, a lot of our focus right now isn't necessarily to get down here and we got to pass a bunch of legislation, a bunch of bills. It's getting acquainted with the building. It's building those relationships so that I can become an effective legislator and really push for those assets or for the legislation that my constituents want. So I'm looking forward to, again, working with everyone in the building, to working with my constituents and really bringing their interests down here and really starting the conversations. Because, again, how do you get Republicans to go along with funding rural schools more than maybe their larger cities and things like that? So I think it's going to be really fun to have a lot of those conversations. They're going to be great conversations, again, with both parties, and to really move Wisconsin forward.
Thanks, Romaine. I will be a successful first-termer if?
If my constituents decide that I've represented them well at the end of 2 years here, and that means advocating for the issues I ran on and the issues that are important to my district, and doing that in an effective way, and certainly that does mean trying to build relationships both in my own party and across the aisle, but also constituent service and making sure that my office and my staff is accessible to residents in my district, and that we get around and share information and help them with their concerns.
Well, thank you so much.
Yes, thanks for having me.
I want to
Thank you.
I want to thank Democrat Mark Spreitzer of Beloit, who'll be representing the 45th district, and GOP Representative Romaine Quinn, of Rice Lake, who will be representing the 75th district. You'll both be raising your hands January 5. Welcome to the Capitol. Good luck, and thanks for doing the show.
Yes,
Thank you,
Rich.
Thank you.